Cool. That was weird.
Yeah.
Right, I'll start again then.
Sorry.
Welcome back to the NextGen15 podcast. This is episode 2. If you missed episode 1, do check it out. But we're here on Zoom this week. I'm Angus Savage. Dan Richards with me, as always, as he will be all throughout these podcasts. You can catch us on YouTube, Acast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else you fancy getting your podcasts. I think it's just about up and running everywhere now. Took us a couple of days to get it all launched on everything. If you want to get in touch with us on social media, by the way, we've had loads and loads of requests for schools that we want to get involved and things like that. Big shout outs all week. So it's at NextGen15 on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. And apparently you can also catch us on TikTok. There's someone much younger that's sorting all of that out. Don't you worry. But yeah, do send in topics you want us to talk about, shout outs for people. We've even got happy birthday request in here. So there's all sorts to get through. And if you want to get in touch with me about anything that's not necessarily what you want on the NextGen15 forum, it's at Angus Savage XV, and we'll work out whether we want it on here or not. Dan, first of all, though, how are you getting on?
Yeah, really good, thanks, mate. What an incredible first weekend of Schoolboy rugby, and from starting on Friday with some incredible games, right through to Sunday with the phenomenal games up at Sedbergh that we were so lucky to have on the live stream, and great games across the country. Some really close games with interesting and some teams sticking their hands up. So lots to talk about, lots to discuss, and lots to look forward to. So yeah, really excited to get going.
Yeah, plenty to get stuck into, and it was such a weird. Well, I mean, obviously, the whole country's away, but it was such a weird start to the weekend. I mean, so much excitement about the fact that it was going to be the opening weekend of the school season. Everyone's sort of getting their team sheets in and all the rest of it, and then suddenly, obviously, the Queen dies and the world changes on its axis almost immediately. We thought rugby was gone completely, and then rugby was back for a bit, and then it was gone again, and then it was back again, and then we had live streams that were they live, were they not? But we ended up getting rugby underway, and that was great. So we'll get stuck into that, because realistically, that is where it's at. And that was where the excitement was. And I think we're going to sort of start in a bit of reverse, I think, because it's useful to start where we've got footage, I suppose, and that's with the schools championship. I was up there in Sedbergh watching Millfield v Clifton in the sort of showcase game beforehand, and then obviously schools championship game number 1, Sedbergh against Whitgift, which was a very special occasion. We finally got to release the footage yesterday. And the response has been great, but I know that you've had a look as well. What a couple of games!
Phenomenal games, and yeah, probably a bit oversight for me there to not mention at the start the context of this weekend. I thought what was hugely impressive was the manner in which the games went off on Sunday, and I'm sure that was repeated around the country where games went on. I know minute silence everywhere, lots of games played in a really good spirit. When you saw up at Sedbergh, the boys lining up side by side in alternate teams and things like that. And I know you can talk about the boys were eating together and stuff like that. And I'm, to see those things repeated, to really display the values of the game at a time, at such a difficult time for the country was really important. On the pitch, I mean, Millfield Clifton was just phenomenal. In terms of, really Clifton, as we talked about last week, put down a marker. They looked like, if not the side to be in the country, certainly in that top handful. And I think I think you've actually still got a really good Millfield side there. That we shouldn't discount Millfield now because they've lost a game, and that's why we've got, one of my issues with some of the formats is you lose a game, you're no longer in the running. That Millfield side is a top side, and I think that will be proven as results are borne out in results over the next few weeks. In terms of how the game went, look, there was loads of skill players on display, and I know that I'm sure you'll talk about some of that Clifton backline in a minute. But I just wanted to focus on the battle up front. Probably a bit of bias from there. I thought that was one of the best, one of the best battles of front rows that I've seen in the Schoolboy game for a long time. I thought, Johan Emmanuel and George Payne going up against each other was just, we don't often talk about scrum battles. I know we're going to talk about front rows later in the pod. They both look ready for the next step. They're great in the loose. When I thought those two at scrum time, I was kind of fascinated by that, and kind of at different times. Clifton started really on top, really putting Millfield under pressure, and the Millfield scrum really came back at the Clifton scrum. Also with that, obviously Louis Trevor in the Clifton scrum, just a phenomenal player. He was
a freak in the loose as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, and that try, which you should talk about now, was just absolutely phenomenal. But it was that Clifton victory was based upon a really powerful performance up front that gave those phenomenal backs a platform.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, we spoke a little bit beforehand about the fact that Millfield actually, as you say, they're a seriously top side, and the thing that highlighted it for me the most was the way that they were able to actually keep Clifton off the scoreboard for as long as they did. I think an awful lot of teams would have collapsed under that pressure quite early, and they wouldn't have been at fault really for doing so. It was a phenomenal amount of power and energy that was coming across. So to actually be able to stick it out for as long as they did, and to find a way actually to get across the line themselves through power, really actually said an awful lot about the strength of that Millfield side.
If you haven't watched it, go and have a look at it. It's a great showcase for the level of the game we're talking about. There's a key moment in there around the 50-minute mark, I think at the 49th minute, where there's a breakdown penalty that, from a bit of quick thinking from Eamon Rodgers at 10, leads to a try that probably puts the game out of reach. But again, people will talk a lot about that moment of creativity, but it's the breakdown penalty that won it. And there's a couple of key moments in there that Millfield could look at, and I'm sure you'd feel a bit. There's a couple of mauls that got stopped that you might have wanted a different decision if you were supporting the blue stripe. They could have, that game. Games are swung on key moments, and that was pivotal in that game. But the quick thinking of Eamon Rodgers, helped kind of put the knife in the heart.
I thought Eamon Rodgers had a fantastic game as well.
He was absolutely superb, as was Tom Bowen. Yeah. And I think Eamon and Tom Bowen look like, I think, two backs we'll talk a lot about, as well as Isaac Campbell, who just brought such power again to that midfield, and some real big spot tackles. So, fantastic. Yeah,
and announced on air at the start of the game that they're looking to join the schools championship for 2023, which is pretty cool. It's good to see that sides are from the off going, this is something I want to be a part of. I'll tell you what, Clifton added to it in a big way. I mean, they added to it in a big way on Saturday, and or on Sunday rather, and they're going to add to it in a massive way going forward. I can't wait to watch them for the rest of the season as well. But I tell you what, I can't wait to watch Sedbergh again as well. I don't think they played that well, and they were still just clinically ruthless when they got the opportunity to put the ball through it. Probably 2-3 passes once they're on the front foot, they just looked unplayable. Incredible.
I think I've written down ruthless, muscular, slick. As kind of when I've tried to summarise their performance, I think Whitgift will go a little bit disappointed with. I thought the defensive breakdown work was really good. They got some penalties. I think they'll be a little bit frustrated with some of their attacking breakdown stuff and some of their set piece stuff. That I think, because line-out's a massive launch pad in schoolboy rugby, and when you lose that, it's difficult. But you've got to give a bit of credit to Sedbergh for taking that away from Whitgift. And I still think, again, as we said with Millfield, that's a really talented Whitgift side. Even without the international, there's some really good players, and I really liked their second row, back row, the back five of that scrum. I thought they worked phenomenally hard. Not the biggest boys, but really good testament to what a good schoolboy back five looks like. It's always amazing with Sedbergh. You talked about in comms that they base everything on their defence. They build from there. People don't, and spot on. Their attack is it looks so simple. They basically almost play around teams. They do it to lots of teams, and it looks like, oh, well, you just hold your depth and you pass accurately and you get outside line speed, but it really isn't that easy.
There's a reason New Zealand were basically doing that and no one else could do it.
100%. And it's to the credit that all the coaches that they do, that Noxie does, that a lot of their tries came through breaks in the wide channel. There's a reason. Tom scored a lot of points, because they were getting there. They were getting outside Whitgift. That isn't a bad defensive press from Whitgift. Sometimes lost a bit of connection, but overall pretty good. But the accuracy of Sedbergh, in just the accuracy of catch pass at pace was incredible, and always is. It's so hard to defend against basics done that well. We can overcomplicate our game sometimes. Fundamentally, it's simple. If you can win collisions and if you can catch pass really well, you'll probably be pretty good. And that's what Sedbergh showed us on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, Sedbergh's, there are obviously some unbelievably talented players there. There's no getting away from that. But it is the way that they work together, as you say, and as I kind of mentioned in commentary, through defence and in attack. But they just have these absolute game breakers. I mean, Ben Redshaw obviously is a quality player at 12, but it was all about Tom Burton at 15 in the end, who was just running some fantastic lines, but just had that confidence that you sometimes see in a schoolboy player to just go, yeah, back myself. And he just went for it. Yeah. It was so good to watch. And, what a moment. First game of the season, hat-trick on the live stream. He's going to remember that for a while.
Yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things about schoolboy games. That's a moment that Tom and his family and his mates can take with them forever. That will never be forgotten, regardless of what happens with Tom's rugby. That's something that he can cherish forever. But again, going back to I thought Glover and Ivers created such a platform. Those guys can't do what they do without that platform, and Glover's carrying particularly was abrasive, and that's hard to stop. He looks like someone to really keep an eye on in terms of the way he carries and fights the tackle was really impressive.
Yeah, and he set the tone rather. I thought he had two massive carries within the first 2-3 minutes of the game, and I think I always think sometimes first game of the season you need someone who just kind of does set that tone that just everyone goes, okay, we're in it today. He just set up a phenomenal platform right from the off.
Yeah, no, he was, and again, the starter games shouldn't be underestimated. You could look at the scoreline of that game and think it was one-sided, but that game was not one-sided. When Whitgift, even when Whitgift scored at 24-10, you think, okay, something might happen here. Whitgift can fight back, but away that's hard. And I thought there was actually, I think it's Sam Gareth-Smith, the second row, just nearly got an interception really early that led to a scrum. You think, if they get that intercept try and score away from home, that maybe that quietens down the bagpipes. It takes away from that kind of celebratory atmosphere away, and you can, if you could go in front. In the end, Sedbergh took the lead and kind of controlled a lot of the game from there. And we talked last week, going away from home in schoolboy rugby is really hard. It's hard at any level of game, and almost, I think, gets exponentially harder the further you go. And so to go up from Croydon up to Cumbria, that's a hard task. And that scoreline, I don't think reflects the quality of that Whitgift side. That they'll bounce back, and we've got two school championship sides, in Whitgift and Wellington, who lost their opening encounters, which shows there's really good sides outside the school championship. We know that. We talked about that last week, and two sides will be looking to bounce back and fire into each other in a game that play for the Seb AO trophy. That's already a really big occasion.
Yeah, 100%. There's a few bits I want to get into kind of off the back of that, but there's one thing I want to do just first, because it's one of our Instagram points that someone came in with, which is I want to give a shout out to Josh Marlowe, who scored 2 tries on his debut in the lower sixth. I think on commentary I was calling him something else because the numbers weren't written down correctly on the team
Blame
sheet.
the coach.
So,
Blame the coach.
oh yeah, well, what is Noxie playing at? Fill in your team sheet, right, mate. But no, it was Josh Marlowe, two tries on his debut, so he deserves a shout out because he missed his moment in the sun from a commentary point of view. But fortunately, when he grows older, he'll be able to mute me and he'll be able to watch the footage. So
He's got the clips. He's got the clips.
Exactly, he'll be all right. But the sort of wider thing on that game, or both of those games, was about, you got four schools all coming together to one place. There was a dinner on the Saturday night. I was fortunate enough to have beaten the traffic sufficiently to actually be at dinner, which was a good effort because I was on a stag the day before. So I was working hard to get myself from A to B. But it was amazing. So they had a dinner, and all four sides in the sports hall, actually the Queen's Hall up at Sedbergh, and immediately Noxie just stood up. Simon Mulholland, the Sedbergh director of rugby, stood up and went, right, everyone on your feet, find your opposite man, find the guys from the other game that play in your position as well. You guys are on tables together. So you had all the centres on one table, all the fly halves and scrum halves on another table, all the second rows on another one. It was really cool, and set the tone. And Sedbergh are very good at that. They've got a real sort of understanding of that. But I think that's the bit. There's a wider context in terms of school rugby on that, because that's what school rugby kind of is all about. It's about more than just what happens on the field. It's about setting a tone and setting, we talk about values of the game, and sometimes people turn their noses up at it, but it really is about setting a sort of a mindset and a way of being.
Yeah, I think probably cynically, the professional game talks about values a lot, doesn't always practice what it preaches, and I understand why. It's a business at the end of the day. It's a results, but the schoolboy game, you don't have that results pressure. Of course everybody wants to win, but if you speak to directors of rugby, they will say they want all the young people under their care to emerge from their program with rugby having taught them something that will equip them for later life. Whether that's the friends you make, that you learn a bit of resilience, that you learn a bit of humility, that you learn actually a bit of confidence. That different people need different things from the game. And there is great friendship. Whilst there's huge rivalries in schoolboy rugby, but loads of the guys know each other. That's the nature of now, where the world is more connected than ever before. And I always love it when, after games, you'll see guys in their respective first 15 shirts who have, might have played club rugby together. They might have gone to primary school or prep school together, and they'll be having photos taken with each other's family. And it's great. Like, they're really fantastic moments that a lot of people don't see. And again, that dinner's superb. It's the kind of thing that at the schools I've worked at, you try to do a lot. When you go overseas, you always do it. I know you've been up to Broad Street. We do exactly that. After the Broad Street game, you get the boys in and they sit down with their opposite number, have a chat. And, yes, it's gladiatorial. And rugby, this is a bit of a cliche. I know that you go and knock 10 bells and you shake hands after it. But the schoolboy game is really good at that. And we actually need to appreciate that that's an important thing for young people, to be able to switch on, really competitive, do all I can to win, whistle's gone, Yeah,
I think that, that's the bit that people love about school rugby, and it's certainly a big reason why I wanted to be involved in it, is that, that camaraderie that you get. I think it's more heightened than it is anywhere else in the game, to be honest, at a school level, partly because schools work so hard to ensure it. But we've got to get on and look at the rugby that's to come, because I tell you what, we've got some absolutely incredible fixtures to come. But I'm talking nonsense because I want to look at what's been. Because I want to start with the results that we had last week. Every week we pick out 10 games to look at. We've obviously covered a couple of them there. Warwick Bromsgrove from that list of 10 was sadly one of the games that was cancelled in the sort of in the wake of the death of the Queen. But that still leaves plenty of others to get through. And I want to start with the Friday night fixture, which was Hampton against Seaford College over at Cobham. We had someone down there having a look at that game. I'll be honest, I thought Seaford had that one nailed down before the season started. They had a really good Colts group, a strong lower sixth. But Hampton, with a slightly more experienced side on a wet and horrible night at Cobham, and a 24-6 victory for them, that really took me by surprise. And fair play to Hampton, that bodes really well for them.
Yeah, I think I would have been with you, mate. I think it's the way Seaford have been building in the last couple of years. You know, that program looks ready to take the next step. Maybe that helped fire Hampton up a bit. You know, Hampton looked really good at the President's Cup. Maybe we didn't give them enough credit for that, and getting to the final against Ipswich. But that would now, it's interesting. You get the results in week one that teams suddenly take a jump. Obviously, we learn a bit more going through week 2 and week 3. But Hampton, you would now again maybe back to being in that kind of top 10-ish conversation, and they'll be excited about going off to St Joe's. They'll put a lot of emphasis on that. So an exciting group there, and really nice for Andy Beattie, who works really hard over there to be taking that over from Sean to get that win. I'm sure him and Sean.
I'm sure there was a bit of chat in the background.
Really well, great result for Hampton, and delighted for them because it's a great school, great program.
Yeah, and I was really impressed by that one. Another one in the top 10, Oakham beating Rugby 29-14 away from home. That's a strong result from Oakham, because I think anyone winning at Rugby is always just a little bit special. Another one that really jumped out to me, Brighton College 29-0 against Tunbridge. That's a really solid start for Brighton College. Last week we spoke a little bit about the work that Nick Boyd does down there, but looks like the team are off to a very good start there.
Hope maybe we've got another kind of classic Brighton team, and again we'll see as we go along, and we'll learn a bit more as we see. That result is an interesting. It will get put into context over the next few weeks, I guess, as we see what happens. But it looks on the face of it, based purely on what we expected. We didn't expect. I expected that game to be closer, and fair play to Brighton. I'm sure Tunbridge will want to turn that around pretty quickly. That's a very proud program, and they'll want to fly out the blocks this week to prove things. But no, great start from Brighton there.
Yeah, big time. Another one that really jumped off the page for me, Daily Mail Trophy champions, Berkhamsted, off to a winning start. But I think the real story there is how close RGS High Wycombe ran them. A 6-7 defeat, absolutely fantastic. And just looking through our sort of social media input that we've had from some of the listeners who are desperate for us to talk about RGS High Wycombe, because they host St John's Leatherhead next weekend, who only lost 29-27 to Hurstby Point College on Saturday. So you've got two teams there that are going head to head, having just narrowly missed out. But from an RGS High Wycombe perspective, that's a really good start. The fact that it's an L rather than a W shouldn't worry them too much, because I think that's a really strong effort.
Yeah, and I'm very aware of not wanting to sound patronising, because I know RGS High Wycombe have had some of the great schoolboy teams and produced some of the great schoolboy players. Christian Wade just signed back for Racing 92 back in rugby union, and there's countless names that come through that school. But if ever a loss would go down as a win, this year, I think in terms of what they do, the context they're in, the recruitment that both schools are able to do at 16 and 11 that's huge. That was a massive. I didn't expect that, and I think it shows the change in nature of schoolboy rugby. You can go from being right at the top to not quite there, and it'd be really nice if this was. If RGS started knocking on that door again, because they've been a name that we've missed from fighting right at the very top echelons of schoolboy rugby in the last kind of 5 years or so.
Massively so, yeah, and actually it speaks to something that I want to just sort of dig in on a bit in a little while, about just how close and tight a lot of the games are or have been in this opening week. But we've got a few more to rattle through first. We've got a live stream on Friday night, Ipswich School against Northampton School for boys. Join us at 7:30 p.m. on Friday for that. Ipswich off to an absolute flyer, 69-0 against Uppingham. I don't really want to get into it too much because, you know, it's a tough one for Uppingham to take, and we know how good Ipswich are. But I suppose the one little bit of context for me is just that it is a sign of just what quality this Ipswich school side has, and they're definitely a team to be looking out for, and tune in on Friday basically, because you're going to be witnessing a pretty special team.
Yeah, look, NSB have had a really close game with Dempster, and that would have been an incredibly physical game, the way those two schools go about it.
I do actually, though, just on the Ipswich game, I want to give a shout out to fly half George Herbert, because he's the man whose birthday it was. George Herbert,
Nice.
happy birthday for the weekend. Just sort of rattling through some other games, and from that 10 to watch, Stamford 12-10 against Stowe, one of those close games we've been talking about. But we know how good Stowe were going to be. I thought originally that they were without their under-18 internationals as well, but it turns out after Northampton Saints Premiership Cup game was canned, Stowe had their internationals, which just says even more about that performance and that result from Stamford, and marks them out as a side that we should really be keeping an eye on this year, because we know that Stowe are good. There's one more game obviously in that 10 to watch from the weekend that we're going to get into, but just before we do, I was just been scrolling through my notes and picked up another couple of little tidbits that I wanted to get out there about some of the teams that were involved in the top 10. Hampton, their under 16s against Seaford College also won, but came back from 21-3 down to win 29-28. So fair play. There's obviously some depth at Hampton, but also some real spirit going on.
Yeah.
And then just sort of within that context, Brighton and Hampton going up against each other on Friday night. We'll get into the fixtures to come, but there's some interesting stuff already starting to emerge in that sort of circle. But into that final game from the 10 to watch, Wellington College against Harrow. Massive game, of course. The school's championship side, Wellington College, against a side that perhaps might be looking to work their way towards that in Harrow. Obviously, you've got a little bit of skin in the game, but a stunning effort from Harrow, 21-15, a performance of unbelievable strength and physicality, and 21-15 in the end, probably quite good for Wellington College, given where the game was at, sort of with not too long left on the clock.
Yeah, it's obviously hard for me to be completely neutral on this, and I won't even try and pretend to be. But I think so. Kind of caveat to that before I speak. Huge credit goes to Harrow. James Melville, the head of rugby, and the boys. To go away opening day of the season to big side. The things I talked about last week that's a phenomenal result. It will hurt Wellington. It was in terms of the way the game panned out for the first 60 minutes. You want to put a positive spin on it. You talk about where you finished well. You got to try and carry a bit of momentum from that last 10 minutes now into the next week. There's huge amounts to learn in terms of, again, similar things around which they'll want to improve some set piece stuff, improve some breakdown stuff. So there'll be key areas looking at the stream. For those you watch, look for that battle, because I think that could be a key one going into this Saturday. But we have to give credit to that Harrow team. There's phenomenal players through that side. I thought they looked so in tune with each other. They looked very much on the same page, of single mind, of single purpose, and they did everything required to get in the end a pretty convincing win. That will shake Wellington, and I'm sure they want to bounce, but we have to give huge credit to Harrow, like a phenomenal performance there on the opening day.
Yeah, and I think they were leading into the season high expectations of Harrow. A good Colts group, a good group of low sixth from last year coming through. We were expecting them to be very good. We spoke last week about the fact that we thought that they would be putting the pressure on in a big way, and that actually probably the big test for them was, could they go to a place that is as hard to play at as big side at Wellington and do the job, and they've proved that straight away. And I think the early season expectations on them well founded. For a Wellington College context, from my point of view, just makes me really excited about the fact that we've got them on the live stream on Saturday. 2:30 kickoff against Whitgift. Catch them on the live stream in the schools championship. But yeah, that's, as we mentioned before, that's two sides that have been on the wrong end of the scoreboard in the first week. They will have learnt a huge amount. I mean, that was a big thing that emerged up at Sedbergh, was the amount everyone was prepared to focus on what they can learn, particularly from defeat. And those two are going to have learnt a huge amount post weekend, and then coming into Saturday, I think that just sets up to be an absolutely brilliant occasion, because they are both going to be flying out, and you know what 17-18-year-old kids are like. Their heads are going to be in a seriously competitive place, I would have thought. But the key thing this weekend was just how close some of the games are. I mean, we've already mentioned it. Hurstpierpoint College 29-27 against St John's Leatherhead. Denstone College away at NSB, who of course are on the live stream on Friday, just going down 11-12 against Denstone. Collegiate, who of course were Colston's, going to RGS Worcester and winning 22-21. I don't know about you, I think that's a really impressive result, because RGS Worcester have been sort of knocking on the door a little bit recently.
Yeah, nice, and great to see them pushing again. So yeah, it's great. We want them back involved. Well,
100%. You know, it's school rugby feels in a good place when Colston's, or Collegiate as they're now called, are sort of knocking on the door, doesn't it?
Definitely.
The other one that stood out again, KCS Wimbledon were absolutely fantastic last year. Different sides, different years, of course, but there's obviously a decent amount of player carryover. But Reeds travelled there at the weekend and picked up a tight victory as well, which I think probably says a fair bit about Reeds. I know they've been quite busy pre-season.
Yeah, and it's, again, Reeds, a team who a few years ago, really strong. Jack Kenningham, who's now starting for Quins, came out of there. There's a few of the guys who've gone on to play really good Bucks Super Rugby. So nice to see them again. They're, Steve Pope, Tony Talbot have always run a really kind of disciplined program there, where they get the most out of the boys, and the boys really buy into it. So really good to see them find at the top end again. So yeah, great result for Reeds.
Yeah, massively so. And then we get into what I think are, certainly outside of that sort of 10 to watch, what I think are probably the two outstanding results of the weekend. Old Swinford Hostel travelling to Monmouth, which, regardless of the level of any Monmouth side in any given year, I happen to think this is probably quite a strong Monmouth side. It's a horribly difficult place to go, and Old Swinford Hostel went there, played an absolute thriller of a game, 60 points shared, but Old Swinford Hostel come out on top, 31-29. That's a standout.
Yeah, I mean, exactly as you said. I think that the way around that is the fact they've gone away makes it even more special. Monmouth, we just talked about Stamford, a team who are very proud at home. Lots of schools very proud at home. Monmouth would be in that conversation. Tough places to go and play, and pride themselves on that. And yeah, great from Old Swinford Hospital. Yeah, they've got another tough fixture coming up this week, where they take on arguably what looks to be one of the best one or two sides in the country. So we'll learn a huge amount. But yeah, hats off, and great to see them getting that sort of result to start. But again, I think Monmouth looks strong as well, so I'm sure they'll look to bounce back and get a strong result this weekend.
Yeah, massively. It whets the appetite for that Clifton Old Swinford Hospital game in a big way. We'll find out a lot on that.
Yeah.
But then what I think is just an absolute stunner of a game is Epsom College against RGS Guildford. RGS Guildford, 15-10 victory, first time in 11 years that they've got the better of Epsom College. Difficult place to go. RGS, if you've not won in 11 years against someone, you're probably not turning up with a huge amount of expectation, but what a fantastic effort from them.
Oh, just amazing. For me, the result of the weekend, just pipping Old Swinford Hospital. I think in most of the weeks that would be the result of the week, but that is the result of the weekend for me. That Epsom program has been flying. Since Paul Burke has gone in there, they've recruited out at 16. They worked really hard on getting boys in at 11, 13. they are, rightly ambitious to establish themselves as a top school. They've not lost some stronger fixtures, and they want to get them back. They've been to Champions Trophies finals and things like that. They've produced a lot of boys who've gone on who are now in the pro game. RGS Guildford, have very different challenges, and a hyper academic institution. They won't have the same room in terms of making allowances around entrance. And what Ben Dudley has done there for a few years is just slowly build, making RGS Guildford more competitive. Historically a great school, going back to the likes of Jack Clifford and stuff like that. So great to see them, hopefully the start of what could be a vintage year for RGS Guildford. Really excited to see how they go. If I could have watched one of the games from the weekend, I would love to have seen that. I'm fascinated to know kind of how that panned out, because there's a huge amount of talent in that Epsom team. I don't know much about the RGS Guildford team, I will admit, so I'm keen to learn more and will be keen to watch them as we move forward.
Yeah, massively. I'm the same as you. I would have loved to have been able to see that one in person. And to be honest, the bit I would have loved to see in person is the end of the game, is the RGS boys at the end of it, because they'll be loving it. And do you know what? Even if it, the season sort of tails off from this point onwards, which I don't think it will. I think after something like that, they'll be flying. But even if it was to, they will remember how it felt coming off that pitch and what the bus journey back was like forever. You remember those little things, and that's really what the whole thing is about. We're going to get into, so a feature I used to do before we started podcasting was top 5 school teams of the weekend every week. So we're going to have a go at that. It's going to be more interesting than it used to be, because I'm actually going to get some pushback, which is great. used to be a dictatorship in these parts, but now I'm going to get a bit of competition on it. But before I do that, I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple of teams who they stood out a little bit to me. Kings Macclesfield going away to RGS Lancaster, Barnard Castle away at Hymers College, Cheltenham College at home against Bloxham, Eaton College against John Fisher, a fixture that went from being away back to home, and it's quite a special fixture. And Eaton are a side I think they're worth keeping an eye on. Haileybury against Felsted, 2 schools that I quite admire what both of them do. And Haileybury coming out the right side of that one, 18-9. And then a shout out to Caterham. We were down there last week, hosted the opening podcast of the season, and did the business on the field as well. That grass was obviously cut perfectly, because 37-7 victory against Sevenoaks. So fair play, Caterham. Well done. Good start.
Yeah, chuff for Caterham, great start, and that's a really even game. That block will have been tight, so that will just be the way that's gone, and well played. I think going back to the Haileybury game, it's Haileybury a program that doesn't get talked about a lot, but Michael Owen, obviously former British Lions captain, does an incredible job there, and that start against the Felsted side that's been strong for a long time. Let's Haileybury, I think, be a team to watch as we go through the coming weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we actually have a live stream of them up at Stonex against Blundell's, nice. your old school in
nice. That'll be a good game.
Couple of weeks. Should be a decent one. That more detail on that once my memory's sorted. But into the top 5 schools of the weekend. So we had a shortlist of 7, and then I'd got it wrong. So it's now a shortlist of 8. And the 8 schools are Hampton, Ipswich, Clifton College, Sedbergh, Stamford, Harrow, RGS Guildford, and Old Swinford Hospital. Lots and lots of other schools, obviously, with fantastic starts to the season. And I always think in the first couple of weeks of the season, this is so difficult to do, because there's not a huge amount of context to what's happened. It takes a couple of weeks to settle into a pattern of understanding how good certain opposition are and things. But just in terms of performances that stood out, those 8 were the ones. So for me, non-negotiables.
Yeah, all right.
Harrow in there.
Yeah. I mean, fair play, hats off. I guess that was not me disagreeing. That's just
it's just that bitter pill to swallow. That's
yeah.
That's the one. Yeah. Clifton College for me.
Yeah, I think that whoever won that game, I think had to be in there. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's again, potentially our pre-season top two, but they both have shone on the opening weekend.
Well, I think they've both responded to the challenge that we felt they had, which was travelling away to a difficult place, in Clifton's case, an unfamiliar place that you knew was going to be difficult against a good team.
Yeah.
And coming up with the performance, that's the bit that does it for me. It's overcoming the hurdles. So we've got two of them. We're not going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. By the way, it's just 5 teams that have done well. We don't want to be ranking anyone. So there's debate for me. I think one we may end up losing, or one of the ones that I think we can agree probably, although you may disagree with me, but one of the ones we can probably get rid of is Ipswich.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's and I don't mean to be disrespectful to what they've done, but I think I want to see them in a tougher game. Like let's see how we go forward. I think they'll be a team to watch. But yeah, they've done probably what they should do there. I would, without being disrespectful to Uppingham. I think I would concur. I'm not sure that would be his top 5 of the weekend.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and not just because I'm an Uppingham old boy and I don't like what happened there. Who else have we got then? Let's talk about Sedbergh. Fantastic effort, good performance in part, clinical when it counted. I don't think they were at their best.
Yeah, so we can park Sedbergh for a minute. I would go to. I think RGS Guildford have to be in there. Yeah. So in terms of what they've done, they'd be, as I just said, my team of the week. So if you are happy with that, that kind of takes us to 3.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think RGS Guildford were. That's the performance of the weekend.
Yeah. So then you can't. I think you've got 2 spots for 3 teams. And I would say that's Hampton, Sedbergh, and Old Swinford Hospital. And I think you'd have to. I would probably actually go like the emotion of that occasion. With everything that was sort of called around it, and Friday Night Lights is special. I would probably go Hampton and Old Swinford Hospital. I suspect we'll see Sedbergh in our top 5 a lot through the season. As you said, it was an incredible performance, and I don't want to take away, but that's probably where I'd go. But there's a huge case to be made for Sedbergh getting in. Again, just the fact again that Hampton won on neutral ground, very tight, probably slightly against the odds, and OAS and Oldham Hospital have gone and won away. That would just tip them into that top 5 slightly ahead of Sedbergh for me. But winning 46-10 at home, open day against a very strong Whitgift team. There's a pretty strong case to be in the top 5 there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think. See, this is where we start humming and ahhing because because 2 days ago when I thought about this, I had Clifton not in the top 5 and I had Sedbergh in it, and now I've got Clifton in it and Sedbergh out of it, and I don't know what I'm doing. I think Hampton. You're right. Hampton have to be in it because Hampton and RGS Guildford. Sorry,
right, that's 4.
Hampton and RGS Guildford have to be in it because they performed so well, probably against expectation. So I'm with you on that. Yeah. Old Swinford Hostel, I'm with you on as well. Away from home at Monmouth, they've had a good Colts year, but the first team have been a bit off where they might want to be for a few years. I think that's a big one. So we've got 3 there. I think Harrow have to be there, don't they?
Yeah. And then yeah.
Clifton or Sedbergh.
You're the boss. You called the last one.
Clifton or Sedbergh. I think I do lean Clifton.
Yeah, I think based on the weekend. Again, there's lots of honourable mentions. Sedbergh, Stamford. But it's. I think that looks about right to me. I think people disagree. Tell us. Politely what you would have had, guys. But it's that I think I'm happy with that.
Fair enough then. Right, so the top 5 school teams of the weekend: Clifton College, Hampton, Harrow, Old Swinford Hospital, and RGS Guildford. Give us a shout if you disagree. I'm sure plenty of you will. Tell us why your team should have been in there.
You can let us know if you think we got it
right. You've not been in broadcasting long enough. No one ever agrees, no matter what you say. Right, coming up, we've got a busy weekend ahead of us. Friday night, we've touched on both of these already, but our live stream, 7:30, Northampton School for Boys against Ipswich. I think that's probably the tough test we've just been referring to for Ipswich, or at least the first bigger test for them. And Brighton College against Hampton, of course, which we've already touched on briefly. Two teams with fantastic starts to the season last weekend. A good chance to assess were those performances in line with expectation. It's just that we all had our expectations set wrong, or at least in the Hampton case, had our expectations set wrong, or are these two absolutely brilliant sides who are going to be within a couple of points of each other? It's going to be a cool one to watch unfold.
Yeah, no, I think it's two games that, and we'll get in that jump out on that one. I think you could make a case for that being the game that we we'll learn more going into week 2. What did the context of those week 1 wins, but also the kind of bounce back game between Seaford and Epsom, which will give us again context on the quality of the team they lost to. That's a big game down at Seaford, and Epsom will have been shocked by that loss at home, and I'm sure they've been working really hard to try and put it right, as will have Seaford. So though those are two huge games for different reasons, where teams will want to go and put something right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's the thing, is from their perspective, massive games. From our perspective on the outside, massive games, because we know we'll learn something. We'll get some real info out of it. Elsewhere on Saturday, we've actually got back-to-back live streams on Saturday. So we start at 10 o'clock in the morning with Reading Bluecoat against Shiplake College. Not necessarily the most high profile of games, but should actually be a cracker, because they're two pretty well matched teams from not far apart from each other, so a bit of local rivalry as well. We're down at Reading Rugby Club too, so that should be quite special and a really cool way for these guys to start off. So that one's going to be on the live stream at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I think we'll learn a fair bit about both these sides. I had great fun. We did a couple of live streams of Reading Bluecoat last year on their Vars run. Great fun, because they loved being a part of it, and for me, that's an awful lot of what the school game is a part of, is just seeing people just love it and get involved.
And I think it's we talk about the games that get a lot of profile, those kind of perceived kind of top schools a lot, and that's where a lot of focus. But I would encourage people to really watch that, because what you will see is it isn't just 5 or 6 schools that are playing really good rugby. There are hundreds of schools playing really good rugby. Shiplake College for years under Sam Beckett, actually an old Sedbergian, he runs an incredible program there. They're in a really competitive part of the world in terms of where pupils can choose to go for rugby schools, and it's a British and Irish Lions headmaster in Tyrone Howe, and they've produced some great players and some great teams. And Reading Bluecoat, the same, as you say, local derby. There'll be a bit of extra emotion. All the boys and parents will love the fact that's being streamed. So that'll be a great game. I agree, it'll be a fantastic occasion, and a nice way to get your Saturday going before you get stuck into the Seb Adnir and Lulea trophy.
Yeah, exactly, and we'll move straight into that, and I suppose first of all, a bit of context on why it's called that, Sebadena and Alule trophy. An old boy of Whitgift and then of Wellington College, England under-18, under-20 international, Harlequins and Richmond player. Big things were expected of him, and sadly died before he could quite hit those heights. He'd just been sort of in the midst of a pretty good season with Richmond on dual reg from Quins, and was kind of, I suppose, in a similar position to where Finn Baxter is now, actually, where he was sort of on the cusp of starting to make that move towards Harlequins. But the game obviously is played for a trophy in his memory. And will be on the live stream at 2:30, the schools championship, second round of the schools championship. We've talked about it already, but two teams that probably have a bit of a point to prove going to this one now.
I think so, yeah, and kind of, as I said, most will feel they've got similar points to prove. I think from having a look a bit, they will feel their work-ons in terms of what didn't quite go right were quite similar. So some points then, and both have got some really exciting talent that if those packs can get a good platform, that actually those guys didn't get a chance to necessarily shine as much as they could have, in their games, the respective games last weekend, but they'll be relishing the chance to get on the front foot. So that battle up front in that game, and I will always lean towards that, but it's that's a key one to watch for me in terms of who can generate that quick ball, who can win that battle, who can get a bit of ascendancy there, and then get kind of rocking around, because once those teams get on the front foot, either is really hard to stop. So no, exciting game at Whitgift this weekend.
Massively so. Another one that really excites me. Oh, by the way, you can 2:30 p.m. that kickoff on the live stream. Another one that really excites me. First game of the season, or first sort of proper game of the season for these two. Trinity against Cranley. Trinity, obviously, Schools Cup winners last season. Cranley, always a tough side to play against. They've had some absolutely outrageously good teams over the years. Slightly trimmed down their fixture list of late, but this one stands out to me as a game to keep an eye on, and one that we're probably going to learn quite a lot from.
Yeah, it will be that, probably a bit of a learning experience for us as kind of observers of the game. Cranley, new head of rugby in there with Andy Houston, having gone to be director of sport. Under Andy, school had success, of which I'm not sure they had before in playing, and so is that, can they kind of get back to those levels, I guess is the challenge now. Trinity, someone we talked about last week, this will be a big marker for them. I think if Trinity can, both these teams, probably looking to Trinity to back up Cranley to kind of get back to pushing to where they feel they belong, having been over the last, and so getting momentum is massive. So whoever gets over the line in that one will feel pretty good about the rest of the season, I think. So a really interesting game there at Trinity.
Yeah, massively so. I'm really interested to see how that one goes. I think there could be big things to come from Trinity again this year, but it'll be interesting to see how they start. Another one that jumps off the page to me: Barnard Castle against Woodhouse Grove. I think the north of the country probably gets a bit of a raw deal sometimes in terms of the sort of headline fixtures that get talked about, but this is a monster of a fixture. Barnard Castle obviously is sort of legends of the school scene and of kind of getting back to somewhere close to where they were. At Woodhouse Grove, kind of, while Barnard Castle weren't where they once were, in many ways sort of filled that gap. They've had some really good teams over the years, so that'll be a good one. Yeah,
I think it'd be amazing, and you're right there about the north of the country in terms of coverage. And I need to learn more about it. As I said, my career has been spent down south, so have more knowledge about that area of the Schoolboy game. Barnard Castle, as I said, I think definitely got the most. I love the Barnard Castle shirt, the diamonds, and it was a shame when they dropped off for a bit. having produced so many great teams. As you said, Woodhouse Grove filled that, so a little bit of kind of bragging rights you've probably got at the moment. Sedbergh as kind of the main team in the north, with Kirkham Grammar pushing them really hard, and then this is probably right who's now going to come and if we can get kind of 3-4 teams there, and obviously RGS Newcastle, there's more teams emerged up there now. And Sedbergh, Kirkham not getting it all their own way, and certainly under since Lee Dixon's gone in there, Barnard Castle have really shot forward. And again, Tony Jackson's headmaster, a former Oxford Blue, so someone who's, I'm sure, keen for the first 15 to go well. So yeah, exciting game there.
So yeah, I think that's going to be a really cool one up at Barnard Castle. There's a few I just want to kind of rattle through, because the first Schools Cup game of the weekend, Oakham v Uppingham. I only really mentioned that because it's the Rutland Derby. I went to Uppingham. Oakham had a win at the weekend, quite exciting. Stowe heading to Oundle. Obviously, Stowe want to make a bit of an impression early on. Bromsgrove to Thomas Riches, Denston, St Peters, York. They're good games. Monmouth, Cheltenham College, Bedford against Rugby. Millfield heading over to Blundell's. That should be quite interesting. I think Millfield will probably change up their squad a bit. Shep really likes to give guys an opportunity. Radley College against Sherburn, an opener for both. Be exciting as well just to see Kirkham get an opener. Their game at the weekend cancelled, but they're heading off to Lancaster RGS, and then obviously RGS Guildford. I want to see them again. Hosting Wimbledon College. Wimbledon College had a bit of a tough outing last time against St Paul's, who were just absolutely fantastic. But yeah, we want to see what RGS Guildford can do. Yeah. One that I think stands out for me a little bit, probably not one that people are going to shout and scream about, but Eaton College against St Paul's. Classic game, two of the most famous names in schools. Forget the rugby part, but also two sides that had very good outcomes at the weekend, and I think probably have a decent amount of promise for the season ahead. So I think, one will probably learn a little bit from that one. Harrow hosting Dulwich College, first game of the season for Dulwich, and historically a massive fixture. But Harrow, I mean, I guess we expect Harrow to probably come out on top of this. Dulwich certainly in the last couple of years haven't been quite where they were once upon a time, but of course year on year you never do quite know. But be interesting just to sort of see how that one shakes out. Stamford against Haileybury, obviously both with victories at the weekend. Two sides that I think have got plenty of promise. Stamford are probably screaming and shouting about not being our top five as well. I think they were in my original one as well. I don't know what's happened here. I've put teams in and put teams out. It's terrible. RGS Hull Wycombe, St John's Leatherhead, we've already mentioned, but that'll be a cool one. Just two sides on the wrong end of really close games last week. Hopefully it'll be another close one for the two of them. And then obviously Clifton College against Old Swinford Hospital. That could be massive. We've talked about it a little bit already, but that's a potentially cracking fixture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, I think, in terms of, to continue with the theme of we'll learn about it. So we'll learn a bit about how is this a really strong Old Swinford Hospital group, and if Clifton do win comfortably, then I think that would really put an exclamation point on just how strong the Clifton College group is.
I just want to do a few of the shout outs to some of the guys that got in touch with us on Instagram. Bradford Grammar School off to a good start away at Ampleforth College, a bit of a Yorkshire derby there. They're hosting Stonyhurst at the weekend. Cheltenham College, of course, that victory against Bloxham. They now head to Monmouth, who of course were part of that great game against Hospital. Eastbourne College got in touch. Very excited. They've got two games this week. They're actually playing this afternoon against Worthing College in the Vars before taking on Sutton Valence on Saturday. Big challenge that both of those for Eastbourne College, because both Worthing and Sutton Valence are sort of climbing up the ranks. Worthing developing a pretty close relationship with Quins, and Sutton Valence equally so with Saracens. So that's going to be that'll be an interesting week for Eastbourne College. We'll learn a lot about them, I think. Gravesend Grammar are desperate for us to preview their game against Maidstone Grammar. I can't really preview it that much because we've not got enough info really to give it any great depth. But both teams have got Vars games this afternoon against so Gravesend playing Trinity Sevenoaks, Maidstone playing Tunbridge Wells Grammar. I think if they can get some momentum from that heading into Saturday, they'll be feeling pretty confident, whichever side gets that momentum from midweek. So we'll see how that one all shakes out. Shout out to Moncton Combe as well. They were we didn't have their result early on, and then about 55 people got in touch with me to let me know that they had a great victory over at Kingsbridge in 33-5. So Thomas Rich's under 15s, they beat Clifton College. Clifton had never lost at that age group. As in that group of 15s, haven't lost as 14s, etc. So fair play to Sir Thomas Riches. Looks like they're a side to keep an eye on going forward. Trent College wanted to shout out about their game against Loughborough Grammar on Saturday, because their opener against Nottingham High School, a bit of a derby, was cancelled. And Skinners were keen for us to have a look at their game against John Fisher. And actually, I will just have a little bit of a look at that, because that's two schools that have a propensity every now and then to just punch miles above their weight. Skinners, we saw it last year, beat Tunbridge. John Fisher, of course, I mean, they've got a ridiculous history. Have had some absolutely incredible teams down the years. But that'll be a cool one, I think. That's two teams that, for want of a better way of describing it, care an awful lot.
Yeah, and again, two of the certainly in the south of England, two of the strongest state school programs over the last 10, 15 years. And John Fisher, that would have hurt. That result against Eaton, a few years ago, those results would have been completely reversed. They would have been expecting to win that game. Since Matthew Gold moved on to Abingdon, they potentially haven't hit the heights, despite the fact they've had some great players. Coruscant with the 20s, Ben Waghorn signing for Quins last year. They've got a good group in there this year, so that would be a great game. A lot of those other games, that the Cheltenham Monmouth game, that's a really old historic fixture. That'll be a lot of emotion in that. Yeah, that Bradford against Stonyhurst. There's a lot of those games I've been again, and having beaten Ampleforth, and that Kent Grammar School derby, that'll mean a lot to those guys. I can imagine a few of them they might have known each other, might have sat Enders, I don't know, in terms of Enders exams around the same time, might play club rugby together and stuff like that. So good luck in their vases, and sorry we couldn't give it more of a preview, but as you said, we just don't have enough information yet, but it's some loads of cool games going on around the country.
Oh, it's incredible, and that's what it's all about, where there are literally hundreds of games going on today, and there are several hundred games going on. The last sort of bit we're going to talk about, which is we are going to be picking out a team of the best players that we've sort of seen or worked with at school level. It's going to be, roughly speaking, from 2012 onwards, but we'll take on board some thoughts from a few years before that. But kind of the last 10 years is what we're going to look at, and what you'll see through that is that some of those schools that they may not be the strongest in the country right now, but they've had times and periods where they really have been the absolute best, and you'll see that reflected in some of the players we debate. So Dan, this week it's the front row. We're picking the entire front row.
Dream.
This is tricky. This is tricky on a number of levels. Front rowers often don't necessarily stand out unless you're working closely with them, because a lot of their work is, not fancy stuff. However, there are a few players that certainly I'm going to argue the case for who really do the fancy stuff. There's some pretty cool players in this mix.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add is we're gonna focus on, I think, what they did as schoolboys. There's obviously a lot of guys who've come through. Rugby's a late maturity sport. People come through 19, 20, 21, and probably props, not looking to get first team experience until mid-20s would be a kind of average point. Obviously, some guys get experience before that. You alluded to Finn earlier, having played some first team rugby at Harlequins in his first year out of school. But that's not the norm for a front row player. So I think that's important, that we're not talking about what they do in a professional shirt, in an academy shirt, in a age grade international shirt. We're going to focus on kind of what they did for their school, and that's kind of where I think we're going to focus this. So let's get started. Again, let's get started at Loosehead. And chat about some names. So go on, you kick us off.
I threw out 3 names. One of them we've already mentioned, Sebadena and Alule. Had a great early career at Whitgift, and then moved to Wellington College, and I had some absolute barnstorming games. I think he played across the front row during his time. It's a while ago now, but I think he did actually feature kind of across it. But I've lumped him in at Loosehead, but take your pick kind of thing. And then the other 2 I threw into the mix were Bevan Rod up at Sedbergh and Benno Urbano at Dulwich. But Benno, of course, played a huge amount of time at number 8 and slotted in all over the place. I mean, frankly, as a schoolboy, could have probably played in the centres if he wanted to. But you've thrown another few into the mix, and we've had a think about some others. You got the Ben Solomon's twins.
Yeah, they were phenomenal for Whitgift.
Absolutely
Johnny lately at Caterham, phenomenal.
Phil Brantingham from RGS Newcastle, Will Hobson, obviously you worked with at Wellington College, and then Mako Vunipola, who doesn't quite meet our criteria of being kind of in the last 10 years, but I think it's worth a discussion about it. Him and Henry Thomas playing loosehead and tighthead for Millfield, and I think it was around about 2008.
Oh, yeah, that is the Lindsay Haig team. That Millfield team was outrageous. I mean, particularly at sevens, but Millfield's not. Shep's had some incredible teams over there, and it'd be interesting to speak to him about what he feels was his best group. But that group would have to be pushing it, surely.
Gotta think so.
Yeah. That was.
Just imagine coming. You're a 17, 18-year-old kid, and you turn up and you're a front rower. You might not be that big yet, and you suddenly see that you're playing against Mako Vunipola and Henry Thomas as your two-thirds of your opposition front row. That is that's fairly terrifying, and also highly skilled. It's the worst combination of all to be facing.
Yeah. No, it's a challenge, and I think you talked about Benno there, Benno Abano at Dulwich. Now there's a bit of some really good loose heads will play, all really good front rowers will spend time outside of their front row shirt for their school, because schools the scrum is a bit depowered. You can only go 1.5 meters, and the 19 you can only go 45 degrees. So sometimes it makes more sense to get those guys in at 8, get those guys in at 12. And that's not a new thing. You go back to World Cup winner Andrew Sheridan did that at Dulwich, and then they repeated that model with Benno Abano and later with Josh O. But I think stand out in a schoolboy shirt and I. Whilst he played, what I'm leading to, whilst he played a lot of rugby at 8 for his school, I think in terms of what Benno Abano did for that Dulwich team makes him the guy for me. With, again, as you said, Bevan Rod, Johnny Ben Solomon, probably the honourable, and Will Hobson as the honourable mentions. But yeah, I'd probably land there. Don't know what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I want to give a shout out to Phil Brantingham, actually, just because he was brilliant for RGS Newcastle, but that St Joseph's Festival tournament, what was it, 2019, I think?
19, yeah.
He was outrageously good. I can't actually remember off the top of my head. He may have got player of the tournament.
He did get player of the tournament. He did get. I think the first
sensational.
Is he moved to he was a tight head at that point? I know he started at the Falcons. He gone to Loosehead.
He started at Loosehead for Falcons, yeah. Well, maybe we chuck him into the tight head conversation then. There we go. Yeah. We'll think about that. We'll keep Brantingham in the back pocket. Obviously, just in the context of that St Joe's tournament, Will Hobson, you worked unbelievably closely with him during your time there, but he was, again, brilliant in that St Joe's tournament, because you had bodies that were just falling apart by the end of it, and he seemed like he was almost sort of last man standing, human sort of wrecking ball, just taking on all of the team's problems onto his own shoulders and just fronting up.
Yeah, Will was amazing that week. I mean, you talked about that, the Millfield front row with Mako and Henry, and at that point, we had Finn Baxter, who's gone to Loosehead now at tight head, and you had Will Hobson as an option at Loosehead. You also had Lucas Brook at that point, was playing hooker for us, who's now a professional back rower, and actually other guys like Ali Heaney, who's gone on to be linked with Munster. So ridiculous front row options in that side. So spoiled, but I think Will, it was a shame that he didn't get his upper 6 year, and he carried a few injuries to his lower 6 year. But that weekend at St Joseph's, he kind of showed a lot of people what he was all about. The semi-final against Kirkham, the final against Kirkham, stands out for me. And so, he got us going. He ran an incredible line close to the ruck. I think the stream is still like them. Yeah, it's a great. I
remember it well.
Of kind of, and again, just it's even more for people who aren't aware of St Joe's. 2 days of kind of back-to-back 20-minute games. Everyone's exhausted. I remember our fullback Hector had two dead legs, and how he was able to move was beyond me. And so how to see guys running hard and being that physical was just phenomenal. So yeah, I think he gets it. But as I said, I'm aware I'm trying to cut out my internal bias of knowing the guys I know as characters, and I think I just remember watching that Dulwich side with Benno in it, and just being just blown away by how he took the side on his back whenever they were in trouble. And so yeah, that stood out to me. I think maybe Will slightly but the fact he had such high quality around him, and maybe Bev and Rod the same, you know, in some ways. Benno had some really good players in that Dulwich side, but it felt like he was so pivotal to what they did.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was always going to come down to a choice of Abano or Rod. Rod for me was, well, it is, but you know, as a schoolboy, he was unbelievably highly skilled. He was like a sort of second coming of Mako Vunipola in many ways. Just able to play as a link man rather than a traditional front rower. And actually, at the time, his frame, sometimes it came across as a bit of a shock that he was playing in the front row, because he wasn't your traditional front row shape. But I think you make the point that is why I was already leaning towards Benno Abano as well, which is that while all of these guys had really good players around them, Benno Abano to me was the player. He was the man that kind of Dulwich success was almost built around. He terrified opposition. He was almost shocking to watch at times. He had so much power for such a young man, from such a young age as well. He broke into that Dulwich College first team, I think, as an under 16. And you know, in the heavy duty stuff of the front row, that's actually pretty unusual. So I think we're settled on Loosehead, Benno Abano, Dulwich College, 3 Schools Cup winners' medals around his neck. Difficult to argue with that one.
Yeah, and a nice point you made that again, and there's not that we're alluding to there's anything wrong with joining a school of 16, but it's nice that he went all the way through the school, that, you know, and that, I think sometimes that means the badge means a little bit more to boys, and maybe we saw that with Benno in the Dulwich shirt. Right, onto Hooker.
Well, I'm thinking we're going to go tight head because right. I can see a debate coming at Hooker. So let's go tight head. Okay. And so what I've done here, I threw in Josh Abunope of Dulwich College as a tight head, because on the rare occasions that Sam Howard fielded both of his superstar props at prop, that was the way around they went. And I wanted to make sure that he at the very least got a shout out, because he was a phenomenon. We've spoken about Phil Brantingham, and we've thrown him into the tight head mix. Marcus Street down at Exeter College, not that widely known, I think, in the sort of in schoolboy circles, partly because he was part of the ACE program, but worth noting that at the same year that Marcus Smith got picked for England under 20s as a schoolboy, Marcus Street did exactly the same. He just happened to be playing at prop, so people get a little bit less excited. He was a very, very good schoolboy. Yeah,
and I think, you know, for guys that were watching the Prem, you know, he started, he's now, it takes a while for props to physically mature and fill their frame, and, you know, he's been introduced really well by Chiefs, and I think he was really good in that win over Tyson. This could be his breakthrough as a pro, and he was standout as a schoolboy. We, you know, some ace guys may get overlooked. There's a huge amount. You know, Hooker, you know, we could talk again. Luke Cowan-Dickey in his time at Truro was phenomenal. Another name we could talk about there. But it's tight head there. Look, it's hard for me to separate. You know, Phil Brantingham was superb. There's probably two guys I've had the fortunate to work with. Harry Williams, who's also down at Chiefs, was superb. But as a schoolboy, for me, Finn Baxter just jumps off the page. Now, again, I'm incredibly fortunate to have had the privilege to work with Finn for 2 years, so it gives you more insight. But his work rate, again, it was just phenomenal. Like the amount he gave the team, but also his leadership. You talked about Bevan Rod's core skill set. You know, Finn has that, the ability to, you know, not just Finn can run over you, Finn can put someone into a gap. And his maturity, you know, as a leader, I think. I remember, so again, to go back to that St. Joe's game, we conceded a try against Kirkham in the final, and you know, led by, you know, Carl as kind of head coach at that time. Like, important the boys led it, and it's emotional. You know, it's a national final, and Finn just got the boys in very calm, just pointed out, look, we've just made this defensive error, just fix that, trust ourselves, trust our system. This is what we're going to do. We're going to kick here. This is what we're going to try and play, and that stands out. Not many 18-year-olds can do that. Not many 18-year-olds have what Finn's physical gifts were, but even fewer have the physical gifts plus that maturity to lead and understand the game. So for me, Finn Baxter is the standout across that time, with, again, Harry Williams, again, Ben Solomon. I actually think in that Clifton Millfield game, there's actually some guys out there playing this year who could push that, but I would, nail my colours firmly to Finn Baxter on that one.
Well, that's why I wanted to jump straight to Tighthead, because ultimately, to me, it wasn't that big a contest. Finn Baxter is, of the last decade, he's the standout. He's the standout Tighthead. I think he has, and as a schoolboy had pretty much everything you'd want. That leadership, I think, particularly is what makes him stand out. The only other guy kind of on our list that I think sort of fits that mold is Phil Brantingham in terms of a leadership context. But I think in terms of when you then add to that what unfolded on the pitch, I think Finn then stands up just a level above even that of someone like Brantingham. And the bit with Finn that I could be wrong on, but it's always something that struck me is he has that baby face, and that could lead to him being underestimated by a lot of people, because you look young and people go kind of, because you look young, they probably assume you're a bit soft, because that's just what people are like. And so despite what was probably a bit of unconscious prejudice against him in that front, being a front rower, he's still just performed at such a high level, got such great recognition for his time, and I just think he excels in every area that you'd want a schoolboy to excel at, let alone a rugby player, and let alone a front rower.
Yeah, and as similar I said with Bev and Rod, in that they can do standout bits in the loose, but you don't go and have a successful professional career, but you don't go and have if you can't do your core job. And Finn is the bottom line that Finn Baxter's got that shit. We'll move on to the bigger debate at hooker, but a standout in that position. Again, as I say, one of the great privileges of my coaching career to have had 2 years just watching him develop, which was superb. Right, hooker.
Here we go.
Right. Okay, go on, you go.
Well, we've got a short list of 4, which I think is going to very quickly become a short list of 2. So just a shout out to the 2 that probably aren't going to be the 2 we're debating about. Henry Walker of Bromsgrove, skipper of Bromsgrove when they won the Schools Cup. Bromsgrove actually ended up with 2 pro hookers coming out of the same team. Beck Cutting up at Worcester Warriors as well. But Walker was the leader of that side and a real standout. And Sam Riley at St George's College, Weybridge, who was an absolute phenomenon. I mean, he was the man in that team, and by such a distance. And in a year that, in any other year rather, he would have been absolutely the man. Everyone would have been talking about it, but he was overshadowed because there was a man by the name of Alfie Barbary, or a boy at the time by the name of Alfie Barbary, at Bloxham in the same year group, who was just doing freakish things. And it's Barbary and Jack Walker from Prince Henry's Grammar School, who's now at Harlequins, who are probably the 2 we're going to end up going back and forth a bit on.
Yeah, and I think just, with Sam was, again, someone I probably saw decent, and when I was at Case from a bit of up close and personal, and with Ben Johnson, former Saracens international, running that program. Actually, a school Watson brothers have come out of. Sam, again, as I've mentioned, just took that team on his back, took them to some silverware. So you can't, in terms of schoolboy performances, you can't take that for granted. But I think that might be why we come back to Alfie again, because in terms of won a slightly harder cup with his team. Other ones I give a shit, kind of some younger guys who are pushing. I think it's worth mentioning. Ollie Burrows a couple of years ago came out of Millfield, now making his way at Exeter Chiefs. Again, maybe didn't quite shine as much because there were some standouts around him. So he wasn't like that in terms of, Ewan Richards in that team, Dan John, people like that, Will Joseph in that team. So, but Ollie Burrows, I think someone who could have a bright future and was superb, young Welsh player. Jack Walker versus Alfie Barbary, I think you're right, is the conversation.
That's the one.
It's kind of like Jack was Alfie before Alfie was Alfie, if that makes sense. So probably guys who are at school won't have been aware of Jack as a schoolboy. So Jack played an age grade above himself internationally. Jack actually captained Leeds Tykes, who were then in the Premiership before he turned 18. So in some ways, more standing, got fast track to the team. I think, to go back to what I said at the start, basing it on what they did for this school, you could argue Jack Walker's schoolboy career was more impressive, playing more first team rugby, playing international. But I think what Alfie did at that Bloxham programme, playing 8 and 12, switching in a final, and I think probably for achievements at school in their school shirt, I would go to Alfie just about, I think.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because, I mean, Jack was a hooker. Out. He was always a hooker and excelled in that position. Whereas, Barbary played, I mean, basically everywhere. Take your pick. Walker, I suppose, as given by the fact that he played a hooker the whole way through, but more of a traditional hooker, I would say, in terms of what you would imagine a hooker would be doing.
Set piece work all the way through. That's important.
But Alfie was, above all else, he was a try-scoring machine as a schoolboy. I used to get emails through from parents at Bloxham going, Alfie's just broken the Bloxham try-scoring record. It was like October. He'd already scored more tries in a season than anyone at Bloxham had ever done, and he did that throughout that season, just kept adding to that total. And I think that was his lower sixth year. I think it was then in upper sixth he did it again. It was freakish stuff. Choosing between them it's so hard. And I know we're looking at this from a schoolboy context, but it is really pleasing how over the last 12 months we've finally seen Jack Walker start to actually get a proper footing in a team and become the number one at Quins, because he moved from Yorkshire to Bath, and then he just couldn't get a game at Bath. And there are good hookers there, of course, but you always felt someone's just got to give him a run of games because he's so good.
I think it looks like he's found his home. Obviously, we don't know him, but it's there, and it's really nice to say as keen observers of the schoolboy game when guys do come through. And even when they have, when it's been a rough patch in the middle, it's been really nice to see Jack Walker come back through and be back in an England conversation, which is superb. Yeah,
it's amazing. But I think I lean the same way as you. I can't not see Alfie Barbary's name on a piece of paper and go, he should be anything other than starting in whatever fictional team I'm putting together, because he was extraordinary, and he was extraordinary in a school that traditionally is not fighting up at the top end. Walker was at Prince Henry's Grammar, who nowadays perhaps people don't know so much about, but back at the time they were part of the ACE colleges league rather. So he was playing that level of rugby. So there were a lot of people. I mean, the entire front row actually ended up turning pro from that team. Lewis Boyce and Paul Hill as well. In fact, we should probably have given both of them a mention. Lewis Boyce and Paul Hill. I forgot about that.
Paul Hill. They were all standout. So again,
and another lad who's just popped into my head is Felstead's Aaron Painter at tight head as well. But the hooker position, I think it just goes to Alfie Barbary, which leaves us with a front row: loosehead Benno Urbano from Dulwich College, hooker Alfie Barbary from Bloxham, tight head Finn Baxter from Wellington College. I don't think you can argue with that.
No, I think you definitely, again, some of those guys you mentioned later, Aaron Painter was standout for us. A bit of recency bias, look, Finn is knowledge. I think that's there. Maybe recency bias around hooker, but what he did for that. Again, let's focus on what they did for their school at that time. And it's, as I said, those, Aaron's gone on a fantastic professional career, but I think, what they did in their respective school shirts, people have different opinions. Let us know about them, and we
100%. Let us know who we've forgotten.
Yeah. But I'd certainly take that back row, take that front row, and trust it to do a good job on any pitch.
Well, there we go then. So our front row we need to work out what we're calling this team. Something that flows a bit better than the best team that we've seen since 2012. I'll think of something that really makes it zip. Yeah. But the front row for our team then: Benno Urbano, Alfie Barbary, and Finn Baxter. Let us know, as we say, if you disagree, or if there's anyone we've forgotten about, or just who would make yours on at NextGen15. Next week is the second rows, and there are going to be some phenomenal players there. But until then, Dan, it's been awesome to chat again. Really looking forward to the weekend. It's going to be good fun. I was going to see if I can get your prediction on Wellington v Whitgift, but you know what? I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to do that to you.
That's fine. Appreciate it.
But that's it for this week. You'll be able to catch us next week as well, and you'll be able to catch this week's on YouTube, Acast, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Get in touch on at NextGen15 on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We'll be back next week. Please, once again, send in your Instagram thoughts, questions, topics that you want to hear about. It's a great way of getting us to focus on some of the things that we might have missed. So we're really looking forward to that. But until then, have a great weekend, and we will look forward to watching the rugby at the weekend.
Yeah, catch you next week.
Cheers.